Hey, welcome to Transform Your Workplace, where we explore ideas that help leaders build better workplaces, ones that are more human, more creative, and more effective. I'm your host, Brandon Laws, and this show is all about growth, how we can develop as leaders, create healthier cultures, and help people thrive at work. Every episode is meant to give you practical ideas you can actually use to transform your workplace and make work a little better for everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by Xenium HR. At Xenium, we know every organization's HR needs are unique. That's why we offer custom HR support. We wrap around your internal HR team or become your full service partner. Whether you need help with compliance, employee relations, training, or strategy, HR experts step in exactly where you need them most. Think of us as an extension of your team, so you can focus on growing your business. Learn more at xeniumhr.com. All right, today I'm talking with Lawrence Armstrong. He also goes by Larry. He's the author of Layered Leadership, Drive Double-Digit Growth and Dominate Your Competition with Creative Strategies and Execution. Larry's perspective on leadership is one you probably haven't heard before. He looks at it through the lens of layers, like light, sound, and even motion, each one influencing how we lead and connect. In this conversation, you'll learn how leaders can build stronger foundations before chasing growth, why developing a number two can multiply your impact, what it means to be a whole brain leader and tap into your creativity like Leonardo da Vinci, and why your personal health and balance are essential layers of leadership, and they shouldn't be an afterthought. Larry's blend of art, business, and leadership is really fascinating, and his layered approach offers a fresh framework for thinking about how we grow as people and organizations. Stick around. This one will stretch how you think about leadership and give you practical ways to build stronger, more creative teams. Let's jump into my conversation with Larry Armstrong. Larry, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brandon, for having me. Look forward to it.
We're going to talk about your book. I think it was out last March or May in the springtime, and it's been super successful. Bestseller list, tons of reviews on Amazon. So people are loving this or resonating with this. It's called Layered Leadership, Drive Double-Digit Growth and Dominate Your Competition with Creative Strategies and Execution. So we're gonna get into it, and I've got a lot of specific topics I want to touch on today. And you open up the book describing the world in layers of light, sound, and even emotion, how we're constantly surrounded by overlapping inputs that shape how we think and how we lead. I think it's such a vivid way to look at this and to frame leadership up. I haven't really quite heard it this way before. It's something that's very multidimensional and creative, not hierarchical like most people think about leadership. So when did you first start seeing leadership in layers like this?
Yeah, so thanks for having me, and I appreciate all the comments. And this idea of layers, I've always sort of perceived the world this way. When I was a kid, all the stuff about emotion and light and physical dimensions in space, whether it be in nature or the built environment, I just sort of perceive, and music, especially with me, the layers in recorded music or live music, it just has always struck me in that way. And so when I applied it to leadership, it didn't really come to me as a concept early on. It was something that I discovered I was doing as I built my practice and I refined my leadership skills and how we were going about building the company. And then when I was working with my art, it's always a very prevalent concept in my art. All of my art is based on this concept of layers in a very abstract way. And so I finally kind of hit on, hey, this is what this is, and I need to frame it that way. And so I began to talk about it in that way. And, I'm in a creative field, And so you put a, design a building, everything about it is in layers as well. But so for me, it was a natural sort of metaphor or idea or concept to use as I was building this. And it's kind of like not necessarily layers on top of each other. It's synthesized, integrated layers that are very much more complex than just the simplicity of something stacked on top of something else. It has to integrate and synthesize, and which is another level of thinking about it, another layer, so to speak, of thinking about the concept.
A line early on in the book really stood out to me. You wrote that developing leaders is one of the most powerful and impactful discoveries and satisfactions. And I'm really curious, like, when did that shift for you within your career and that mindset about like multiplying productivity through other people?
Yeah. Well, a couple things happened, I think, that really helped me come to that realization. The first was I was given amazing opportunities myself. Our founders, Bill Ware and Bill Malcolm, gave many of us, but, particularly me, some awesome opportunities, including the ability to buy them out and buy the company when they were ready to retire. And so that, coupled with early on learning how to be a leader, I made a bunch of mistakes, and one of them was trying to do everything myself. Probably pretty common. You're hard driving, you want to make the most of your opportunity, you're trying to do your best and build something, but you can't do it all yourself. And so when I got all stressed out and anxiety issues and stuff, I had to come to the realization that, I was given this great opportunity, and therefore I need to create opportunities for others to help us reach the maximum potential of our company and the maximum potential for each one of those people's careers, as well as it has happened for me. So, it was a realization of, if you want to get to where you want to go, you need help. And by the way, be grateful you were given an opportunity. How about create opportunities for others as well? So sort of that combination of ideas, I guess, led to what I'm talking about.
In layered leadership, you structured this into 3 different primary layers: the foundation, which is staying balanced, vision and planning, and strategic growth. And we'll get into a lot of that. But you illustrated this like a rocket. And I'm curious why you decided to illustrate it that way and even choose these layers and why they are in order of what they are. And if one's out of balance or you don't, or you skip a step, like what happens to the layers?
Yeah, it's a little bit like you've heard the expression, I'm sure. It goes something like shoot, ready, aim, as opposed to ready, aim, shoot. And so it's kind of like that a little bit. If you don't have a foundation of who you are, who your company is, what you're trying to do, it's hard to get people engaged and get to where you want to go if you don't know where you want to go, or if you just, well, I want to grow. Well, okay, but what's your company about? What's the values of your company? How can you motivate people? What's your mission? How are you different from other companies? You have to have a foundation of what you're doing. And then without a plan, how do you know if you've gotten to where you want to go, right? You have to plan it out. You have to figure out, okay, this is what we are great at. This is maybe what we're not great at that we maybe don't want to pursue, or we want to get better at, or, whatever the case may be. So you have to lay out a vision and a plan of where you want to go. It doesn't have to be complicated, but you have to have it. You have to have buy-in from your people. They need to be excited about it. And so if you have a good foundation, you know who you are, you have a good strategy and a plan and a vision, you know where you want to go, then you have to execute, right? And then you've got all those things. Now, okay, go execute on your plan. And it's a lot easier or more successful and measurable to execute on your plan if you actually have a plan and you know where you're going and people are behind you and they're helping and they're excited. So to me, each one of those is integral, and, it is a rocket ship if you do it right. It becomes a rocket ship. So, the metaphor is, I think it works for that.
It does work. I remember in my early 20s just wanting to jump right to growth. So I totally get the layers and how they build on each other.
Yeah, when we're young, we're impatient,
Totally. Early in the book, you channel Leonardo da Vinci and this idea of the whole brain leader. You said that Leonardo's curiosity was a superpower. And I'm curious what whole brain leadership looks like in practice and how we can all channel Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah, I've studied Leonardo a lot, and he's awesome. I discovered him when I studied in Florence when I was in college, and I've said it many times. He's the greatest genius the world's ever known, and that's how I feel about him. And because he was always curious about everything, and he explored. I mean, it was some of the stuff he did was groundbreaking and centuries ahead of its time because he was so curious and he really put the time into studying various concepts, way beyond, you think he's an artist. Of course, he's a great artist, an incredible artist because of his curiosity and what he studied. I mean, he would dissect animals so he could understand the muscles that made a bird's wing flap. And so he could paint it correctly, stuff like that. And then he would go ahead and design a helicopter, which, flight didn't exist, and he was great at business development. He had these great patrons that supported him, his work. He kept himself in amazing physical condition and health. He ate right. And he always was willing to develop a piece of who he was that maybe he wasn't as good at, he wasn't as strong at. It didn't just go with his strengths, although he had many strengths. He really explored different ideas and concepts, whether that be artistic or scientific or people skills or whatever. And so therefore he was the ultimate whole brain thinker. And he sets a great example for us to try to follow. And so when it comes to leadership, we all have our strengths. If you've been promoted, it's because you've been doing a great job doing something. Most times it's, because you're a practitioner, in my case, an architect. I went to school to become an architect and I did a good job and they promoted me. But when you get promoted, what happens? You're leading people, you're managing people. That's not what you went to school for, right? So if you want to do a good job, you have to be curious, you have to learn, you have to, and so it's this continuous lifelong learning, this idea of you're always learning and you can always get better every day. And so that idea and that approach and philosophy, I think, is super valuable for people to develop.
You challenge us reading the book to find our inner Leonardo da Vinci, to explore where we're uncomfortable, push past what we typically might avoid. Why do you think so many leaders stop doing uncomfortable things once they reach success?
I think, it's complacency and it's people in their comfort zone. And I think that, sometimes people, when they get to a certain level, they go, okay, I made it, put my feet on the desk and, coast. And I think that happens. And even people that are still driving, building their companies, they many times will avoid the tough conversations with themselves, right? Which is, geez, I'm not good at that. You don't have to be good at everything. That's not really what I'm saying. I'm saying if you're a leader, you need to have fluency in all aspects of your business. I hired a great CFO, okay? He's awesome, and I don't pretend to be a CFO, but I understand my financial statements really well, and I can ask him pointed questions, right? And I think that's important. And a lot of people just I call the difference between delegate and abdicate. Some people abdicate that and just say, well, he's taking care of it. He knows that. And he'll just tell me if we're in trouble or something. It's like, it's not really that effective, And so you hire great people that are great at what they do and hopefully smarter than you at what they do, whether it's, marketing or business development or accounting or whatever it is. But you should at least arm yourself with some fluency in what all those aspects of your business is.
You showcase this tinker toy exercise in the book to help leaders visualize their skills. What have you learned by watching people do that exercise, and how does it change the way leaders might view their own growth?
Yeah, because I think sometimes when you're talking about a concept, like I was just talking about, sometimes it's hard for people to wrap their heads around it or take action, or put it into reality. But I found if they're honest with themselves and they, identify those short pieces of tinker toy, I have them make that thing and put it on their desk and look at it and keep it in front of them and say, That short green one means, for me, I'm avoiding, building some client relationships because I'm not really that comfortable doing that or whatever. And it's just a physical reminder that I think helps people visualize what they're trying to do. And it's really a conversation with themselves. When we do that exercise, it's really for themselves to decide what they want to try to improve at. People love that thing. I did it years ago, and the one I carry around, I don't know where it is right now, but it's broken because the pieces have become so brittle, But we had to buy some new Tinker toys for our new leaders, so it resonates for whatever reason. People can at least see it.
In the chapter about developing others, you emphasize mentorship of the number two role. Why do you think developing a number two is such an important layer of our leadership growth? And what separates leaders who truly elevate others into like that number two role versus leaders that don't focus on that?
Yeah, I think that it is one of the most important concepts in the book, in the success of our company, or hopefully any company. But if you're a leader and you realize you can't do everything and you're building your company, there's stuff that needs to get done every day, and you need to have somebody you can rely on to take care of things, that either you don't have time for, or in some cases aren't the best at, or whatever it is. And be honest with yourself. Some people get intimidated or afraid of this idea because, we sort of frame it as you got to train your replacement. And people go, well, I don't want to be replaced. Well, no, that's not really the idea. But if you got hit by a bus, what would happen?
Somebody's going to replace you. Somebody's got to step in.
Right. Somebody needs to be ready. And furthermore, if you want to continue to grow in your career, then you need to elevate the person that can succeed you in your current position. And so it's crucial. And, over the course of history in our company, we demand every leader who's running an office or a business group develop a number two. Sometimes it takes a long time for somebody to do that because they have to get their head around some of the concepts I just said. They have to kind of come to grips with, And so I always hold up, our current CEO as the example because he was my number two for years and ran the operations of the company. And so, see, this is what happens when you develop a number two. You can become chairman and he can become the CEO. And, he replaced me, which was awesome. We try to set an example of how great it is when it works. We've definitely found that our leaders, when they don't have a number two, they get kind of stuck in their growth. They kind of stagnate. Their office gets to a certain size or their department and they can't get past that because they haven't really developed their number two. To me, it's one of the most important concepts in the book.
I love to read, and it's been huge for my growth. And I know you highlighted in the book that there were some books that were very formative and influential in the strategies that you developed at Where Malcolm and for your leaders. What were some of those books? I know Da Vinci by Walter Isaacson was on that list. I have not read that. I've read a lot of Walter Isaacson's books. That was not one I've read. Do you recommend that one as a side note? And then what are some of the other books?
Yeah. So, okay. First of all, yes, that's it's a very complete, of course, Isaacson's such an amazing
writer, like so in depth. I don't know how, years of research, I'm sure.
So much research. And the way he just weaves the whole thing together it's beautiful. You have to read it. And I recommend it to everybody because once you read it, maybe you get what I'm talking about. How and it really is. But anyway, early on, we decided, we were not. First of all, we're trying to grow our company into something much bigger. And we weren't going to confine our, hey, let's be like them. What did they do to get there? We weren't going to confine that idea to our own industry. So we decided to set out and study business in general. Who's done great? Who's made mistakes? What can we learn from those mistakes? Everything we want to do, somebody's done it before. Either good or bad, right? That's for sure. And so we set out to really read business books and read business articles and learn as much as we could. And we've read a lot, but the ones I kind of listed in the books are the ones that influenced me the most and contain concepts that we were able to bring into our own company and adapt to our company. And I think that's really important. If you can get anything out of a business book or a leadership book, it's okay, how can I take a concept that resonates with me and can I apply that to our company somehow, adapt it to our company? You can't become, GE. For example, one of the books is Jack Welch's book. There's several things in there about how he built GE, how he developed people, how he held people accountable, how he wanted to be number one or two in every business he was in. All of these kind of concepts. I adapted all kinds of stuff from Jack Welch, for example, into our strategy. And it's been amazing. So that one, one that you wouldn't think of, maybe Freakonomics was another one. It's a great book, and it's really a lesson in how to think differently, how to try to understand that, things don't happen the way you think they happen for the reasons you thought they happen. And it's just a way to get our leaders to think differently about our strategy, our approach. If our industry's doing this, maybe we want to do this, and that sort of stuff. So the other one that jumps out is Blue Ocean Strategy. That book is talk about, I talk about flashes of light, my inspirations. That thing is brilliant. And we've tried to apply the ideas in that book to our own strategies, how we can create a market that doesn't exist, and that how can we do that to build our business and make us untouchable to competition until they try to copy us or whatever. But so that's been a great one as well. Really great. These kinds of books, when you weave them together, there's a lot of creative thinking, when you read a book and you're inspired and you try to figure out, okay, how do I adapt that to my company? And how do I adapt it to the strategies we're trying to take to grow? That's where the creative thinking comes in.
Not too long ago, was, I think, Steal Like an Artist. Basically, like, there's no original ideas, but if you could read or be inspired by other works and then kind of adapt it to make it your own, like that's kind of what you're doing with the books that you're reading.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it can't be, the business book of the week either. It's like every week you don't want to just, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. You have to carefully weave those things in to what fits your company and the direction you're going. And it has to be something you're inspired by too. If you're not inspired, you're not going to really, and you can't get your people inspired. You can't execute on it.
You dedicate an entire chapter to personal and financial health, saying that leaders need to find a base layer of wellness. Why do you think so many leaders neglect this area? And for you personally, how has prioritizing your own health and financial well-being shaped your own effectiveness?
Yeah, this is one of those baselines, right? You have to have a foundation. If you don't have a personal foundation, then you're not going to have the longevity, right, to get done what you want to do. You are sacrificing yourself for whatever else your goals are, which doesn't make sense to me, right? You have to, and let me just say, again, it was a tough lesson I had to learn because I was doing a lot of that. I don't have time to work out. Gosh, I got to eat a fast lunch. I'll just go to the McDonald's drive-through, whatever the case may be, right? And, business leaders do that kind of stuff all the time. How many times have you talked to somebody about working out, going to the gym, exercising? I don't have time. Well, if you don't have time, you're going to flame out a lot earlier than you wanted to, and you're going to be disappointed because in my case, I flamed out, almost flamed out. I had big time stress and anxiety, and I couldn't, function properly because I wasn't paying attention to myself, to my health. And, same goes for on the financial side, there's this thing is like, well, once I make X, I'll be okay. And I'll be fine. It's like, no, you have to be fine. You have to take care of your personal financial health from the get-go. Figure out how to spend within your means, save money, be disciplined. It's because if you're not, and then it takes it's just one of those other things that'll take your eye off the ball trying to build your business because you're distracted with and stressed out about how much debt you're in or whatever, So those things are critical. To me, you can't get to where you want to go if you're not willing to take care of yourself first.
You use a powerful metaphor of the fleet of ships to describe how your leaders move in formation, whether like aligned, nimble, able to adjust direction together. And you contrast it against a slow moving ocean liner that can't even pivot at all, really, or at least quickly. How did this idea of smaller, well coordinated vessels shape the way you approach your business strategy and execution at scale?
Yeah, this is a pretty old one. I've thought of this probably 30 years ago. We were aiming to grow up into a bigger company that, and we looked up at some of our, well, even at the time, you wouldn't even consider it competition, or they wouldn't have considered us competition because they're so much bigger. But, when I look at them, that's what I saw. And not just in our industry, outside of our industry, companies that are slow to adapt and, so bureaucratic that they just can't adjust fast enough. And so, we were building offices. And so we had started putting offices in remote locations, at least remote from our headquarters. And it was like, okay, how are we going to keep this thing going the same direction? And so I kind of came up with this idea of the fleet of ships. And it really boils down to being integrated and communicating all the time in a one team approach throughout the company. So, you don't just have an office out there in, wherever, Dallas, Chicago, doing their own thing. They have to be integrated. So our services are integrated. Our training is integrated. We communicate all the time. We have leadership meetings 3 times a year, monthly business meetings with every single office. We're aligned on strategy. We're aligned on our product types, our training, our culture. All of those things are very much part of the idea so that you can maintain a fleet of ships. When we're headed towards rocky times, we can pivot together and be in concert with each other and support each other. So it's a really important concept, I think.
You highlighted where Malcolm's philosophy that you don't have a top-down or bottom-up approach, but really a little bit of both. I'm curious, like how you ignite innovation throughout all layers of your organization. Most companies have like an R&D department, but it sounds like you're trying to instill the creativity and innovation throughout the entire organization so every employee can contribute, not from a top-down perspective nor bottom-up, but everywhere. How have you gone about this?
Yeah, I think that this is also really important. I think it's a big cultural thing for our company and one that has had incredible results. So, this isn't one of these touchy-feely concepts. This is one that has resulted in incredible improvement for our company. It's not to say we don't make decisions. We make a lot of decisions top down every day. But when it comes to the creativity and the ideas that come from people that are everywhere in the organization that may experience different aspects of their work and so therefore have good ideas on how we can improve. We instituted this idea, we called it WM 3.0. It was as we were in the Great Recession and just solicited ideas from everybody in the firm in 3 kind of categories. What do we need to fix? How do we get back to, sort of the basics and what are we going to innovate? And, we got like 1,000 ideas and people were really excited about it. And we implemented a whole bunch and we had a little ad hoc group that had to dissect them all and decide which ones could we do? How do we prioritize how to implement some of these things? And there were bigger projects and then there were smaller ones. And the smaller ones that resonated that everybody thought was a good idea, we just went ahead and implemented them immediately. And they helped us immediately. And then, there were some bigger ones that, took a little longer to figure out and work on and put a little committee on. And we implemented a lot of those. And those were awesome too. It took longer to implement because they're a little bigger idea. But when we were kind of done with that first phase of that whole thing, and we had implemented all that stuff, it was like we went light years. It was incredible, and so we've done it several times. We kind of go through these cycles where we had 4.0, 5.0, and now I think we stopped putting numbers on it. We just call it WM Evolve, and we put it out there, and we continue to build that idea. And it's helped us tremendously. That's just one example. We do other things too, but with our mentoring and coaching programs and stuff. But, it just shows that everybody has great ideas to contribute.
Larry, near the end of the book, you said that being an artist has made you a better CEO. Tell me your secrets. How do you believe this?
It's true. It's definitely true. Well, because, when you're an artist, you don't really have any boundaries, right? And so you can be creative, and your creativity isn't hemmed in. When you're a CEO or an architect, let's take architect. It is creative. However, you have the client wishes, you have building codes, you have, structural and mechanical, electrical constraints and requirements. You have environmental requirements. You have a lot of technical requirements. You have all kinds of stuff you have to weave together for the solution, which is great. It's an incredible profession. And same with CEO. You have clients. You have a whole bunch of constituents, right? Clients, employees, partners in the industry, all kinds of stuff, and you're trying to navigate. You have competition, all kinds of stuff. And so just the freeness of being an artist, I think, helps my creativity every single day in addressing the challenges of being a business leader. And that's why I put all this creative stuff in the book. You can see my art all through the book, because it definitely has helped me be a better CEO. No question about it.
You close the book reflecting on growth, creativity, and legacy, and how each generation builds on the previous one. When you think about your own leadership legacy, what do you hope people take away from this layered approach?
Well, when it relates to my company, I guess the legacy is we took a really great regional architectural firm and we built it into an international design institution. And so my hope is that, the people that have succeeded me can take this company to its ultimate opportunities and its the ultimate where Malcolm. And that's the idea. And I think for anybody that reads the book, hopefully, and can take an idea or two out of it and that would help them, I think that would be my hope, that somewhere in there, if you read the book, that it helps you somehow to further your business.
Larry, I've really enjoyed the conversation today. Your book is called Layered Leadership: Drive Double-Digit Growth and Dominate Your Competition with Creative Strategies and Execution. Where can people learn more about you, your work, book, anything like that?
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I have a website that kind of shows my art. It shows the book, my area in philanthropy and leaderships. So lawrencerarmstrong.com is my website. You'll find the book on there as well. The book has a website, layeredleadershipbook.com. Of course, you can buy the book, and my blogs are on I have all kinds of blogs on the Layered Leadership book site as well. And of course, you can buy the book wherever you can buy a book, Amazon, everywhere. And I would encourage that.
We'll put links to all of those resources in the show notes and the article that follows this podcast. My guest today's been Larry Armstrong. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Appreciate you.
Hey, Brandon. Thanks. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate you having me on.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode of Transform Your Workplace. The content on this show is strictly for general information and educational purposes only, so that you can go transform your workplace in a positive way. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the show are the guest's own and don't represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of either Xenium HR, the sponsor of the show, or me, the host, Brandon Laws. Additionally, Xenium HR or myself, Brandon Laws, doesn't endorse any guest, their business, or any organization they represent, so discretion is advised. We encourage you to work with a trusted advisor to find a custom approach that fits your organization's needs. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode.